Life, it comes at us like a train with all its ups and downs, its pains and its joys. How do we deal with it? How do we process it? How how do what we learn from life and especially what we teach life back in return makes all of the difference. Welcome to Life Talks. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Life Talks. I am really excited to bring another amazing conversation and important conversation in this week's series called Allies. As you know, we are still within the United States and globally engulfed in the conversation of racism, Black lives, minority lives, and the conversation has many different arms to it, and one of them includes the call for individuals who are not of that particular culture to speak, to share, to defend, to say something. And understandably so, in the beginning of all of the crisis and all of the protests, tensions were rising pretty high and hot. And I saw on social media a lot of arguments and even calls for, people talking about their friends, their white friends. If they're not speaking, then they would unfriend them or they won't talk to them. But in dialogue with many of my friends, they didn't know what to say. Um, they didn't know how to feel. They didn't know how to translate it. But it did not mean that they did not hurt with the Black community. And so now that more individuals are coming forward, I'm seeing an emergence of pretty amazing allies, as I call them. And so I have asked some of the individuals that I know, who I know for sure are in this movement or this fight to bring equal treatment of all people together. So I've asked them to come onto the show, and one of them I'm really humbled and honored to introduce to you is Superintendent Jeremy Garlock. Jeremy started in ministry a little over 20 years ago. He started off as a teacher, then on to being a principal, and then he served at the same time as a superintendent and associate youth director in the New York conference in Atlantic Union. 17 months ago, he transitioned to Pennsylvania to be the superintendent at the Pennsylvania conference. A little bit of how we got connected is through this move. He's also married to Joya, I believe I pronounced that correct, and he's a girl dad. His daughters are Arilla, Brooke, Marissa, Kai, and Maya.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be here to talk with you.
I'm excited too. So I just want to mention a little bit about how we got to know each other. And it wasn't the conventional way of meeting someone where we were introduced per se. And I really appreciate your vulnerability and this open dialogue. Although we're talking about being an ally within this racial tension, but it engulfs other subjects too. And
Right.
that's how we ended up connecting. And I am so honored to call you my friend. And we've developed a friendship, and it just speaks about the kind of person that you are.
Thank you.
That something like this can emerge from a very tense situation. So a couple of weeks ago, I took to social media to share some concerns that I had about some of the experiences that some of the students from Blue Mountain Academy were experiencing. And this is part of your jurisdiction. BMA falls under your jurisdiction.
Correct.
And I think by now everybody knows that I am a former BMA parent, current BMA parent to even some of the students that are still there. But there was a lot of concern and hurt that was being expressed through social media and within the channels of the children, the students communicating. and they felt that they didn't, that no one was speaking up for them. And so anyway, I took to social media and, in a sense, did a call for action and raised awareness about some of the things that we had seen, kind of like the scales were tipping in a reverse direction, in a sense, as far as for representation and diversity and so forth. And needless to say, it did grow viral, and it ended up coming to your attention,
Mhm.
which I was hoping for. I did not know you then, but I honestly just wanted somebody who had the power to make change, to join the discussion, or to hear the cries of the students and a couple of staff members too. You reached out to me through a third party and asked for a dialogue. I have to say that when I saw that, at first I said, well, I don't know if I want to have this conversation yet, because um, there were many nights that I was still crying because we were still getting a lot of testimonies coming forward from students and parents. And it unearthed a lot of memories from past students and current students. And so I really needed to pray to make sure that this conversation wasn't just about the video, but that it was intentional, and that it would, some good would have come out for the kids. And so I had a conversation with the provost of Andrews to kind of share with him what my thoughts were, but also to come in to talk with you a little bit more educated, and
Mhm.
not just as a parent crying out, but as someone who would have maybe some suggestions. And I was really, really humbled when you called, and how the conversation started off. It was really honest. It was a hard conversation, but your humility came through. And I think I did tell you this before we spoke, a number of students reached out to me and shared with me that they liked you. They shared with me that their encounter with you was always good. They were seen, they felt valued, and that they believed that you cared for them. And if they thought there was anyone who could make a difference, it was you. And so that's why I came into this meeting with you with a little bit more confidence that at least we can have a good conversation. And we did. And then we
Yes.
started talking about everything else, including
Our
our
kids.
families.
Yes.
So I asked you if I can share a little bit about that, because I know some of these individuals are going to be watching, and I wanted them to see what happens when people who care about others, even though they may be on the opposite side of the spectrum, if they really care about the good of people, they can come together, have a difficult conversation, find common ground, be on one accord, and move forward together for the greater good, which is what you did. And so, kids, see, this is what happens when prayer and true love for you happens. And then I asked you if you could come to talk about being an ally, because you have proven to be one within the scope of this other conversation. So I know this was a very long introduction, but it was necessary so that
It's fun.
when when our audience sees this, they will see that behind the scenes there's been progress in healing, and we want to now bring it forward with this talk. So share with us a little bit about your journey in education and how you got here from uh, to being a teacher, then youth director, and here.
Well, let me tell you, my whole life has really been a journey of God saying, do this, and I say, I don't want to, and he says, too bad, do it anyways. That's pretty much my life.
Oh, join the club.
I didn't want to be a Christian, I'm a Christian. I didn't want to be an
Uh,
Adventist, I'm an Adventist. I was going to be a musical producer and engineer. I was going into my senior year for that, had a job lined up to do that, and God said, no, I think you should be a teacher. And I said, are you kidding? I hate school. Why do you want to put me into school? I don't like school. I have a learning disability. I never
ah,
enjoyed it. And that piece of learning disability, that's something that taught me a lot growing up. And that is to not assume you know anything about somebody else.
mm,
As a young person growing up, I had several teachers that really assumed that I was lazy, or they assumed that I wasn't putting in effort or these types of things. The fact of the matter was I was trying very hard and was very discouraged because no matter how hard I tried, I just wasn't getting anywhere. So, some of those are some of my early experiences that shaped some of my views that said, you can't assume anything about anybody, and everybody has a story, and everybody has a heart, and you got to get to know people and what's going on in their story and in their heart. So, that was kind of the beginning of that for me. Eventually did become to be a teacher, moved back home to New York, to my home state, and taught in Syracuse for 10 years as a teacher, assistant principal for some of that time. I had my oldest girl was getting ready to go off to academy, and I wanted her in academy, but I didn't want her to go. So I requested a transfer, and that was what brought me to Union Springs, New York. I taught in a little school there, right up the street from Union Springs Academy, and I did that for 4 years while my girls were attending either that school or the academy. From there, I went to be the superintendent of schools and associate youth director. And that's an unusual combination for some people, but I just love kids.
Right.
So I was always, yes, I'll go speak at camp. Okay, I'll do something with the teen tent at camp. Primary tent? Okay, no problem. I'll do that. So anything to get me with the kids and to be doing something with them and to give them an experience that would be meaningful to them. And so that's how I kind of got roped into the associate youth stuff. And then as associate youth director, I was at camp often. Being a camp pastor and speaker there, I was in charge of developing young adult ministries in the New York Conference, and really had my hand in anything else that was non-club oriented. Pastor Whitlow had the camp and the club ministries, and I took the other items and really tried to get a balance of ministering to kids that couldn't be in our schools. So we were seeing, because for me, and this is when I realized, and it was Pastor Dan that said, Jeremy, you approach education as ministry. Most teachers do that, but there are some that don't. And so he saw me that for me, and what I became passionate about, I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to be a teacher. And my first about 2.5 years of teaching, I hated it because I think I'm good at it, but I don't get intrinsic satisfaction from seeing that light bulb go on. But when I see that this can be used to further someone's relationship with Jesus, to help teach them the perseverance, to let them know that there's someone in their corner for them, then I become impassioned. That's what I live for. And so that's what I did with youth ministries. That's what I did with the schools. Back in October of 2018, my wife and I just started feeling that be ready. A change is coming and a call is coming. We weren't looking for it. We didn't have a resume out, but the call came. And so we came to Pennsylvania, and here we are.
Nice.
So
tell me, do you mind sharing with us what disability it is that you have?
It's a visual spatial disability. So basically, and I don't know what the title of it is. My dad's a psychologist, and when this was at an age when a lot of times the schools didn't want to diagnose you. They didn't want to do anything. So my dad actually did the diagnosing. So I never went to another party to get a label. But it's a visual spatial thing where it's a couple of things go into play. Number one, I can't judge space. So if I'm writing on a line and I'm getting near the end of it, I can't judge if there's enough room to put another word or not. And so when you just look at my writing, just that right-hand column just goes all over the place because I can't tell if there's enough space there. And that plays out in things like I can't do puzzles. If I'm doing construction at the house, it takes me 5 times longer than anyone else because I can't eyeball anything. So there's those sorts of things. But then also with spelling, most people, you can picture the word in your mind. You can close your eyes and look at it or write it down and see if it looks right. I can't do that. I have no mental frame of reference for what words look like. So my spelling is atrocious. My handwriting is terrible. Again, when you get to be an adult, normally this becomes very automatic, but still your mind, even if it's fast, your mind imagines what it is, that letter A, what's that supposed to look like? And then as you're forming it next to a mental representation. I have no mental representation, so I'm actually correcting as I go. And so it looks terrible. So typing is my friend. I love word processors. I like to write by hand, but not if anyone else is going to read it. Because of this, it was pretty often, we get those 10-word spelling lists in 4th grade. And I would study with my mom, who's an editor. And we would study that, for half hour, 45 minutes every single night. And I'd get 2 right if I was lucky on the quiz at the end of the week. So that sort of stuff.
So you mentioned, and thank you for sharing.
Yep.
I had never heard of that particular disorder, but some of it does match what I've seen, and
Mhm.
that must have been incredibly frustrating for you.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned earlier that you were labeled lazy,
Yes.
and probably had to face some shaming, if
A little
anything,
bit.
in
A little
classrooms,
bit.
and maybe anxiety and so forth. I can't imagine you walking in for a test. My heart would just be
Mhm.
just knowing that you studied hard, but yet it may not pan out.
You
To
give up. That's what eventually happens. You just give up, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, if you think I'm going to be lazy, then let me be lazy. It's not, my work isn't getting me anything, so okay, I'll become lazy.
and
You
yet
know?
you end up as an educator. Look at that.
Yeah, like I said,
God has
God has
a sense of
you.
humor. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. So, so you also mentioned, which is really intriguing to me because I'm a youth leader also,
Yeah.
and we're from the same conference,
Mhm.
well, the same union, Atlantic Union. But it was really interesting to me because I was a federation president for 6 years
Okay.
in Northeastern Conference, and had the youth ministries down packed. Like I couldn't sleep and do youth ministries. And when I moved down to Blue Mountain Academy, I just assumed it's an easy transition. It's kids,
Mhm.
and I crashed and burned the first year.
Mhm.
Kids, they're very honest, and
Yep.
they will tell you as it is. So the students at BMA, when I came in, basically said, "No, don't try to come pull that AY stuff here. This
Mhm.
is not the same. This is not church." And I crashed and burned. And I realized the difference between regular youth ministries and campus
Mhm.
ministry.
Very different.
Different story, different skill set, some basic fundamentals, but it was a learning experience for me. The beautiful thing about it was that the students said, let us teach you how to care for us. Let us teach you how to serve us and to minister to us. And that was a beautiful turnaround, and very, very fulfilling because it was more of the relationship.
Yeah.
Um, it's home away from home for them, and they just need someone to care for them and to be ingrained in their everyday life. So
Right.
like I said, I did crash and burn, but they didn't leave me as ashes.
Mhm.
They did pull me back together, and I think that's part of why I love them so much,
Mhm.
and I just feel like um, part of their defense in a sense because I have seen what they've gone through. And kids come from all different kinds of backgrounds,
Mhm.
uh, and home situations. And
Mhm.
so, a stark difference, though, from New York and PA, if I can even say that, it's a different culture per se. Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is not in a city.
Yep.
Blue Mountain Academy is not inner city. We're at the base of the Appalachian Mountains, and so it's a different atmosphere. How was that transition?
Well, for me, it wasn't too hard because I was in upstate New York. So our territory
Okay.
covered into New York City. So we did have some cities. We had Syracuse, we had Rochester, we had Utica, and some cities. But we had a lot of rural communities. Union Springs is very similar to Hamburg in that regard. And so there's a lot of rural communities. The entire not Appalachian, sorry, Adirondack region, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is again, very sparsely populated. So that was our territory. So in that sense, it wasn't too hard. But even with that, every region of the country has its own culture, anyways.
Right.
Um, and so sometimes it's a little bit getting used to. Some cultures, they want you to take the leadership and charge, and other cultures they want you to listen for a long time and become a part of them and then lead. And trying to figure that out again, back to make no assumptions, get to know who people are, and then go with who they are.
Good. So I'm glad. I'm glad that you said that. So this is where we segue into this conversation of being an ally. Um, Already. by virtue of being a youth director, a teacher, and in education, you are an ally. You're supposed to be an ally for the children, to be there for them. You are a white man. can, we can see.
Yep.
Um, uh, but yet you're serving not just white students. You are serving minorities, and even with that terminology, you know what I mean. But you're serving Latinos, right? You're serving African Americans of Caribbean and African American descent, right? You're also serving Asians, just all kinds of cultures. Um, in this society right now, where it's clear that there are uneven balances within the African American community, as we see the killings of men and women of that culture. Also, we're seeing with even Native Americans how they're being treated with their lands, and so forth. And now into the school system, where in some cases, unfortunately, we don't see a balanced, whether it's curriculum or representation with those students. How have you become an ally and speaking out against these injustices? And I know I incorporated both in there, but I think they're one and the same because you're serving the same individuals, whether they're in school or in their communities.
So let me, if I can, break this down into three areas.
Yeah.
Heart, mind, action.
Okay.
Right? Heart. Well, let me, kind of a story. I'm a story person, so let me give you some story.
Sure.
I grew up in a family that's a little bit, while we all may look the same, there's some unusual diversity in the fact that my mother came from a Jewish background, my father came from a Protestant background, neither one of them were practicing. We had some other family members that came from Catholic backgrounds. So even from a religious standpoint, it just had some diversity. And while we weren't particularly religious, there was this strong emphasis on you have to respect people. You have to respect people. My mother did not talk a lot about our Jewish heritage. In fact, in recent times, she's been speaking much more. But even though she hadn't spoken very loudly, there was this underwriting feeling of, our people were slaves. Our people, we had the Holocaust. Our people had all these horrendous things. And even more in other places that aren't talked about very often, where Christians would go in on Easter and massacre, numerous Jews and so on and so forth. All these things would happen. And what was talked about in that was, so then if we know how that feels as a people, what right do we have to do that to somebody else? So Jeremy, you may not, this is what I was taught with, you may not understand, you might not get it, but that person, they have their story. We have our story, and our story has highs and it has lows, it has pains and it has joys. Every other person has that. Because you know that, because we know that, you can't judge that person. You can't treat them as differently because they're just you. Their story's different, but their human experience, that's the key, their human experience is the same. So that was really pushed on me as a young person. And I came from a family where you could smoke and it was okay. You could be sexually promiscuous and not many people said something, but if you said something that was racially insensitive, you would find your back against a wall. And that was just the home I was raised in. And so that developed the heart. I didn't have a lot of understanding. I didn't understand what people from other cultures necessarily went through. I didn't understand their story, but that developed a heart. That was part one of developing a heart that said, every person is a person. Before you treat them as anything else, you have to treat them as a person. And if you find that they are having their humanity trampled upon, you can't stay silent on that.
Right.
Because people are people. Now, that heart thing was then amplified later in life for me when we adopted our younger two children. My older three children, Rilla, Brooke, and Marissa, they're our biological children. I'm married to a white woman, so we have white kids, and we love them for everything. We always wanted a fourth child. Long story short, we couldn't have a fourth child. We waited 11 years praying for a miracle, and the miracle came when someone called us up and said, We know of someone that's going to have a baby. They're looking for someone to adopt. Pray that we could find a family. And we were jumping up and down saying, you found your family. And we went, and I remember being shocked when we met the biological mother, and who's white. She's Irish. And she came and she said, actually, the people who contacted us, they pulled us aside and they said, you have to know this is going to be a mixed race baby. And then they leaned back like, are you going to be upset? And I'm like, I don't care. It's a baby. Come on, give me a baby. Right. And then we met with the biological mom. We had the same conversation. And then her sister pulled me into another room to privately say, are you sure you're okay with a mixed race baby? And I had to look at her and say, woman, what are you saying? I mean, give me a break. Does it have a head? Does the baby has a head? I'll take the baby. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Little did I know at that moment. And by the way, the next baby we adopt, another miracle story, she's Asian. So our fourth child, Kai, she's mulatto. So her dad's African American, her mom is white, and then our youngest, Maya, her mom is Latino, and her dad is Vietnamese. So some great mixes that we have here. Well, I kind of played that off and was a little humorous, or tried to be humorous about it. But she wasn't more than a few months old when we started seeing the way other people would treat her, the way that they would look at her. But the difference was, now you're dealing with my baby.
Right.
That's my baby. How dare you look at my baby that way? And started getting a sense for what her life might look like. And all of a sudden, my heart took, while I think my heart was already going the right direction, it took some leaps and bounds steps in the right direction. We had, I've tried to be humorous with some of these stories, and some of them are kind of funny. We had, we're at our outdoor school in New York. I think she was 3, and I'm walking through the cafeteria, and a lady who didn't know me saw me walking with her, holding her hand, said, whose baby is that? So, oh, that's my baby. And she said, no, she's not. And I said, yes, she is. She said, no, she's not. Who's her mother? And I pointed at my wife across the room. She said, no, she's not. And rather than argue with her, I looked down at Kai, and I said, Kai, who's your daddy? And she just put her arms up, and I picked her up. I said, who's your mommy? And she pointed at my wife, and I looked at the lady and said, see? And I turned around and I walked away and just left it at that. But how dare you look at someone and say that can't be your child, or the biases that are happening in that, and the assumptions that are happening. When she was young, getting her diaper changed once at a church, we had a gentleman come up to my wife and see her, knowing that was my wife, so knowing who, that we were married, and saw her with this black child, and then said, wow, your husband must be very tolerant. The assumptions that went behind that statement.
Wow.
Then, and probably the worst one was, I was having a conversation with a gentleman at my home church at the time. And he was an older white man. And in essence, without getting too far in the conversation, because I get angry when I go into this conversation, but basically the conversation was, if she grows up and decides to be a pastor, she's not welcome to be our pastor.
This was your church? You were
my church. I was a member of that church. I was an elder in that church, and had that said to us. These all began to not only affect the first part of my heart and drive me down that direction, but then also began to educate my mind to what her future. We've used the term white privilege, and whether we like that term or not, the fact of the matter is, I'm ignorant. I have no idea the benefits that I have. I'm starting to get a glimpse into this, but really had no concept until these conversations came. And realizing that right now, she's a baby, she's 5, she's 6, and she's home most of the time. I can shield her from this, and if I hear this kind of stuff going on, we can remove her and shield her. But a day is going to come when she's going to be out in the world, and daddy's not going to be there. That tells someone, you're a jerk, get away from my kid. Right. That day is going to come, and it's probably going to come sooner than I'd like for it to come. Right. And all of a sudden, my mind began to be active in this. And then, when we had our first conversation, if you remember, a lot of what I was asking was, okay, this isn't matching up with what I know. This is what I see. This is what I've been told. You're saying this. Help me fit.
Right.
This is the mind. I'm trying to understand. And yes, I was trying to understand the superintendent,
Right.
but I'm also asking because I got a baby.
Parent. Right.
That's my baby. I need to know what can I do for my baby. Because whether it's Blue Mountain Academy, whether it's Union Springs Academy, whether it's Collegedale Academy, wherever it is that the
Doesn't
Lord.
matter.
When my kid goes to school, I want to know that I can have the conversations, that I can affect the changes, that she's going to have the best experience that she can possibly have. And by the way, I want that for every child because I think every child is my child. And so I want that for everybody. So that's the heart. But now I've got to engage the mind. And so to my white friends, I want to say, if your heart isn't there, you got some heart work to do. If your mind isn't there, it's time to start doing this. And let me tell you something. And I'm going to be ashamed at this at first, but I'm going to be open and honest. When George Floyd was murdered, I didn't watch that video for several weeks. I didn't have the stomach for it, and I had heard enough that I didn't want to see it. And then I heard a speaker. I can't remember what her name is, and she said, in essence, this is not the time to not watch. This is the time to watch. This isn't the time to be silent. This is the time to speak. And something about her speech compelled me, and I said, let me go look. And when I watched it, man, did my mind blow up. I mean, yes, my heart continued going down direction, but my mind blew up. To see someone murdered in that way. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Nobody should have to live through that or die that way. The fact that that's happening anywhere, our country or anywhere, is sickening. And again, that could have been my baby. So the mind starts going, and so that put me down a road of asking people, getting the questions answered, trying to figure out. And I'm not there. I know there's a lot that I still don't get, I don't understand, but I'm willing. I'm willing to listen and see. And so for me, this goes beyond BMA. This goes beyond a conference. This goes beyond a system. This is about having the right heart. How do we treat people? And then what do we do with that? And I'll give you one more story, one more thing from my high school years that I'm ashamed of. And it doesn't say, I'll tie it in, I promise. I had a friend named Nathan in high school. We weren't super close, but I call him a friend. And I can remember one day in high school hearing the ruckus coming down the hallway, and looking and seeing him walking with his head high down the hallway, and he's got his books under his hand, and there's a bunch of other guys in the school. I have no idea what the cause of it was, but they were hitting him in the head, kicking him in the butt, trying to knock his books out of his hands, just being bullies. And I knew Nathan well enough and I knew those guys well enough to know that probably he had done something right, and now was facing this because he had done something right. And I remember feeling at the moment like I need to step in, and I need, I felt like I had the opportunity. I could have made a difference. I could have stepped in. I could have walked with him. I could have told him to buzz off. Whatever the case is, I could have done something. But instead, I didn't. I sat there and I watched him go by, and I watched him get that torment alone. And for years, that bothered me. To an extent, it still bothers me. That happened. But something that triggered in me after that, that I can't stand by and watch bullies do things. And bullies come in different categories. They come in your school punk bullies who are just stupid. They can come as national or world leaders that want to bully people. They can come in as administrators of institutions. They can come in as elders of churches. They can come in as the jerkish next door neighbor. They can come in all sizes and shapes, and some of them kill people, and some of them just hurt their feelings. Some of them kill us inside internally, but they're bullies. It's what they do. And I was bullied a lot as a kid. That's one thing. I had gotten to that point in that story. I had gotten to the point where I wasn't being bullied anymore. I joined wrestling. I got into martial arts. I was weightlifting. People don't bully you at that point. That wasn't happening. And I could have used that new status to come in and help Nathan, and I didn't. And I said to myself after that, I will never be in that position again. And so I have lived my life trying to be that person that if you're weak, whatever, whether it's a racial issue, whether it's a religious issue, whether it's a weight issue, whatever the issue happens to be, if you're the downtrodden, it is my job to come alongside you and say, no, you can't, you don't have to be treated that way. And no to you, you can't treat them that way, not without hearing from me about it. And it can't be that way. So the heart, we have to have that kind of heart. We have to have the mind. We have to educate ourselves. We have to be able to look at those hard videos. We have to look at the hardship that's going on and not live in our blindness that we have. And then once we have the heart that Jesus gives us to lead us the right direction, we have at least some inkling of understanding of what is wrong. Then how could we do anything else but then speak up and say, no, you can't do that. And that's not the way it can be. And we may not agree on what the end goal is. And, does it look like this? Does it look like that? But it can't be this.
Right.
And we need to move from this.
Yeah. I really appreciate that, and a true educator at heart that you're teaching and even giving some action plans. And again, I appreciate your vulnerability um, and your willingness to have hard conversations and be uncomfortable and sitting within your discomfort. There are many individuals who say, I just don't know what to do, or I don't know where to start. And given those 3 steps, I think it's a good start. We're not trying to say that we have all the solutions, but we have to start somewhere. And education is something that we all can do. We have the World Wide Web at our fingers.
Right.
Um, I saw some memes during this crisis where Black people were saying to whites, "We're tired. We're tired. We can't answer questions. We're mentally exhausted. Ask Google." And although it was coming from a place of real raw pain and frustration and fatigue, it did give a bigger picture here that there is no reason to not know.
Right.
There is absolutely, there are libraries, and even though we're within COVID and we're all home, if you have internet, you have access. There's YouTube. There's so many vehicles to learn more about what's happening, why people are so angry, and why this hurt in this community. And then the storytelling, which is my favorite. I'm a storyteller also. I believe that you cannot argue with someone's story. You cannot argue with their truth. That is their personal experience. And if it lends to any kind of window to see beyond what your experience is, we should do that. We should listen to people's stories. I appreciate the fact that you gave the background, your Jewish heritage and your Catholic heritage, because anti Semitism is not okay. And that is something that globally we have come and defended. Um, and so it feels good to know that you can draw from your Jewish heritage to be empathetic and to say, I'm not Black, but I am Jewish.
Mhm.
And within that scope, let me find, within that experience, ways that we can be on one accord, where I can understand and say, I understand exactly what you're going through, African Americans, because within the Jewish struggle and the Holocaust, these are kind of some of the things that we experience. You know what it is to be a slave, your family does, and so forth. So I do appreciate that. Do you think that is really the key, or do you believe that that is the key for us to have shared humanity, so that we can defend what you describe as bullies, to somehow find within our experience what we know as pain, and apply that to what someone else is feeling?
I think that's a big piece of it. I don't know if it's the whole answer. I don't know if it's the key. But I think it's a starting point. We can have sympathy or we can have empathy. Which one is it? Which one are we going to have? I can feel sorry for anybody. But if I haven't walked in your shoes, I can't have empathy for you. And so somewhere along the way, we have to try to find, well, what is that common ground so we can have empathy. But let's face it, some of us might not have that common ground. I mean, I know I've had students over the years, they have no idea what their cultural heritage is. So maybe we as parents need to be doing a better job with our children and telling them that. But if that's your reality, that I'm just American, and my grandparents have been here, and life is pretty good, and my biggest concern is not getting to watch what I want to watch on TV. Well, there's not a lot of ground there for, really building an empathy.
Right.
Having that. So I don't know if that can be the only key, because not everyone's going to have that experience. But I think for those of us that have had experiences, whether it's experiences with bullies, whether it's our cultural and heritage background, or whether it's just, we fall in love with stories and characters, I mean, whatever it takes to build this in. And obviously some of those avenues are going to be more powerful than other avenues. But let me tell you something. If we can educate our kids the right way, that is going to be huge. I can remember more than once reading stories, fictional stories, to students who are 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and they fall in love with these characters. That if these characters have something bad happen to them, they're in tears. There's a book. It's a little bit of an older book now called Treasure in an Oatmeal Box, and I read that to my 3rd and 4th graders one year, and it's a story about a family. And the younger member of the family is on the autism spectrum. And you bond with this kid, you fall in love with this kid, and spoiler alert, if you're going to get the book, just pause it for a moment, he dies. And the chapter that he dies, and then the subsequent chapters of them dealing with the grief, I was reading at the end of the school day, and then they had to go to the bus, and every kid walked out weeping and I learned to read the book earlier in the day, so we could process it. That was the first time. But the point being is that those kids had bonded with this fictional character so well that they actually felt beyond sympathy. They felt the reality of what this person went through. And if kids have that ability, then even if we don't have a background, even if we don't know what to say to our kids, about our background, here's where we come from. Well, there's plenty of resources out there that they can fall in love with this character of this culture or this background or this disability or whatever the case might be, and build this sense of empathy and character. Something I teach my teachers. We have a program that we developed in the New York Conference in Education that we're now having here in Pennsylvania called Spirit Compatible Instruction. It takes a lot of
one more time.
Spirit Compatible Instruction.
Spirit Compatible Instruction.
And it's built on the foundation of several other pre-existing programs, that do character development, and they do all kinds of stuff. But the foundation of this is that you can't assume anything of anybody except for one thing. There's only one thing we can assume, and that would maybe two. One is that they need Jesus Christ. That's the only thing you can assume about anybody. And then number two, unless they tell you point blank otherwise, you assume they have Jesus. Now, why do I say that? Because if you were to look at me in public, you'd probably think I was a good Christian, but if you saw me in private, you might question and wonder that, right? And we get to be with these kids all the time in school, so you might question and wonder that. Don't assume that. We assume they need Jesus. We assume they have him, unless otherwise, and they may have their ups and downs, but they have it. And then if we make that assumption, Jesus lives in the heart, and eventually he spreads, and the character, the light of Jesus comes out. And what this program seeks to do is to be able to grab hold of that shining as it comes out of a kid, grab it, and then be able to talk about it, be able to mentor them, and be able to disciple them. And it creates a very concrete method of discipleship, is what it does. But as a part of that is you're teaching kids to look at other people the way Jesus looks at them, to see other people the way that Jesus sees them. And if we can do that, whether it's through our own heritage and stories or through other ones we get from the Bible or other literature or videos or whatever, and teach them in that process, not just to have empathy, but then to also see that person the way Jesus does. Because when Jesus looks at me, he sees his son. Right. When he looks at you, he sees his daughter. Just like when I look at my daughter, I see my daughter. So this guy might say she couldn't be a pastor there because of that, but he's not seeing my daughter the way Jesus does. I see my daughter the way Jesus does.
Right.
And someone else might look at me and say, well, you're just a whatever, whether you're just a white man or you're just a teacher or you're just a whatever the case might be. Well, you're not seeing me the way my Father sees me. So if we can train this in ourselves, but specifically in our children, to yes, have empathy, yes, use your stories, yes, build on the stories when they don't exist, but take that a step further and actually say, and in this, how does Jesus see that person? That is what we need to do. And of course, assumed in that is that we have the right vision of Jesus, right? We don't have the crusade version of Jesus, right? We don't have the weird, creepy spiritual version of Jesus. We've got the warrior Jesus. We've got the compassionate Jesus. We've got the right Jesus. But if you have him, teaching ourselves, teaching our kids to see people the way Jesus does, if we were simply to do that and pull that off, what a difference that would make.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Actually, I stopped breathing while you were speaking because it just, um, I've seen it happen, and I've seen the difference. And and if we can even talk about getting the children from when they're at that impressionable age and not wait, then we're laying a really great foundation for them to speak up and for it to stick, you know. And and so I can't even add any more on that because you said it perfectly.
Let me say one more thing, if I may, on that.
Sure.
You mentioned getting them at that impressionable age. There is no too young an age to start with. I was having a conversation yesterday with Dr. Janet Ledesma, who's a professor in the leadership department there at Andrews. And I was actually asking her to come and do a training for my teachers on cultural sensitivity and inclusivity and inherent bias. And she was sharing with me, and I don't have it to be able to quote accurately, but the gist of what she shared with me was that there has been research that has shown that by 6 months of age, children have already, based on the observations of their parents, learned some inherent biases.
Wow.
And so there's no age too young
Yeah.
to begin training to
Wow.
see people the way Jesus sees them.
Well, if we can even train um, uh, the babies while in the womb to love music,
Yeah.
certain kind of music, and to hear our voice, then you're absolutely correct. What a world it would be if we start even reading some of these stories, children's books, uh, while we're pregnant. Well, obviously not you, but
Wait
to
a long time for that one, but that's it.
you know, what kind of children will we be birthing? It's just we can imagine and reimagine a world where our children are being raised to not just be smart, but also to be smart in their choices of how they care for humanity. So thank you so much. This is such a heartwarming conversation. I was really looking forward to it. Um, I would like to invite you back at some point if we need to do a follow up or continue this dialogue. I'm happy for the students that are under your care within your capacity. I'm happy for your daughters to have such a dad like you
Thank you.
and your wife also, and just know anyone who has crossed paths with you that I'm happy that they will be changed as I was throughout conversation. Absolutely. Um, like I said, I know we don't have all the answers, and we definitely will not see our world change just like that. But as we imagine and we dream of a better place and take the steps to it, I believe your 3 steps are, are are critical, and I know I will adopt them also or continue to use those. And that is, it's a matter of the heart, um, your mind, as far as education and action, and anyone can do that.
Yes.
It's really simple.
Yes.
So thank you again, Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me here. This has been fantastic.
Take care. And again, see everybody. It's all good. So take care and stay cool as you can in this heat.
Absolutely. You do the same.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Life Talks. I hope that you were inspired and that you have felt a rejuvenation in your life. And I hope that what you are saying right now is that the answer that you are given to what life has thrown at you is that I am still here. Email us with your Life Talk ideas at mylifetalkstv@gmail.com. See you next time. Bye.